On the 12th of September 2014, tragedy struck in Lagos, Nigeria. A guest house belonging to the Synagogue Church of All Nations, or SCOAN in short, came crashing down, claiming the lives of at least 116 people, leaving the world in shock. But what had caused such a disaster? Was it negligence?
It's not the time. I will give you a statement, but not now.
Was it sabotage? Or was it something else entirely?
What was the business of the chopper hovering around a particular building 4 times before the incident?
Let's break it down. You see, this building was a 6-story guest house that was built in order to house visitors of the late Prophet TB Joshua. You see, TB Joshua was a very popular, charismatic prophet that would attract thousands and thousands of people all over the world that wanted to have a one-on-one with him. On this fateful day, the guest house came crashing down while it was fully occupied, and this was a shock to his followers all over the world. Among the victims were 84 South African nationals. This was the biggest tragedy to involve South Africans abroad, and it attracted a lot of controversy. But here's where things got really complicated. A government investigation concluded that this was caused by structural failure. Experts found that the building had serious construction flaws, including the addition of newer floors without proper reinforcement. In other words, it wasn't built to support its weight. The report also revealed that substandard building materials were used, and they lacked appropriate permits for additional stories. The engineers who were involved in this project actually had to face legal action. But here is a twist. The church presented a completely different reason. The Synagogue Church of All Nations claimed that this was not an accident, but an act of sabotage. I remember at that particular time I was around 21 or 22 years of age, and I was a loyal watcher of Emmanuel TV as a very religious young woman, and they released footage showing a low-flying plane that they claimed had circled around the building multiple times, and they believed that this aircraft had caused the collapse. TB Joshua claimed that this was a deliberate attack because of how popular and loved he was. But all investigations found no evidence of the sabotage theory, leaving the official cause of the collapse as structural failure. This was not a unique incident. In actual fact, Africa experiences a higher frequency of church building collapses than any other continent in the world. The concept of church in Africa is so different from any other continent, which is why I decided to cover the collapse of church buildings in Africa. I am diving into the stories of church building collapse in Africa so that people can understand just how big of an issue this is. I also want to explore the factors that cause these church building collapses and the recommendations, what needs to be done to stop these church collapses. The second church you want to talk about is called Rainers Bible Church, which was based in Uyo in Nigeria. In 2016, during a service to consecrate their founder as the bishop of the church, the roof of the church collapsed and 29 people were confirmed dead. Though some reports suggested that the death toll reached 120, I could not find any confirmation of that. So let's just stick with 29 lives. The church was still under construction, and investigations by the government revealed that they lacked proper permits for the project. So the cause of this collapse as well was structural failure. I hope that you are starting to see a pattern. The third one I'm going to cover happened all the way in South Africa at a church known as Pentecostal Holiness Church. The church was based in KwaZulu-Natal, and in 2019, the walls collapsed during an Easter service after heavy rains, killing 13 people and injuring 16 others. Most of the victims were elderly women that were attending the service. The cause of the collapse was still the same: structural failure. The trend is becoming much more visible, right? Let's move on to the fourth one, which happened in Rwanda at an Adventist church. This happened in 2018 when the church collapsed during a church service. This particular one killed 16 people and injured dozens others. Heavy rains were initially blamed for the disaster, but the cause was still structural failure. I don't have to say anything by now. You can clearly see that all these buildings were poorly constructed. The last one that I want to talk about is the one that happened in Burundi. I'm not quite sure of the year, but the building collapsed and killed 4 children. This happened in a village in Burundi, and it was not during a church service. If it had happened during a church service, possibly there would have been more casualties. They also blamed heavy rains and poor weather for the collapse of the church building, but the cause was still structural failure. So obviously there are many other church collapses that have happened in Africa, but I wanted to talk about the ones that made headlines. There is obviously a trend that we're noticing that our churches are usually poorly built. This exposes a lack of systematic quality control when it comes to building materials and building processes in our churches. So the reason why churches seem to struggle with understanding codes of construction, permits, and laws of engineering is because they are trying to cut costs. People want finished products without doing due process. So because they might lack enough money for the vision that they have in their minds, they are willing to sacrifice construction procedures, construction processes, and the laws of engineering, which can lead to the loss of life. This bypass of procedures, codes, and permits does not just happen when it's church buildings, it happens in every area of our lives. We have struggles with foresight, understanding how our behaviors now can negatively affect our safety tomorrow. We do things just for today. We want a big building today, we want an attractive building today, but we don't consider the implications of breaking procedures. This is not just a church problem. This is an African problem. It happens even when it comes to our own houses. Cutting corners is a big problem in Africa that we need to address. The only reason why I have covered church collapses only, it is because I used to be a religious person. I used to be a preacher. And I understand how easy it is for people that anchor their lives on belief to bypass natural laws, because they believe that they're protected. So when people do not apply laws of logic when it comes to making such important decisions, it will result in loss of lives. The reason why our roads don't last, our bridges don't last, is because we bypass the laws of engineering hoping for miracles. It does not work like that. It's better for us to be in a shade if we don't have enough money than for us to complete an unsafe building that is going to cost multiple lives. The sad thing about all this is that none of these churches ever took responsibility and accountability for their actions. They chose to blame external factors, which is one thing that religious people do. They should have taken accountability that we did not do the proper thing when we built our buildings, but instead they chose to blame weather, they chose to blame sabotage, they chose to blame every other thing except themselves. Why do you think this keeps happening in Africa? Why do you think that it doesn't happen in other continents as much? It is because they abide by construction laws. I also feel like if churches would be held accountable for building non-safe buildings, it would also happen less, because none of these church leaders were held accountable in the court of law. My name is Edlin, and thank you so much for watching my video. See you in the next one. Ciao.